Listening to King Cam Ujumbe podcast. Ujumbe means message. And yeah, today's message is Lords of the Highlands, Ethiopia's provincial rulers and foreign powers in the 19th century. I figured we was mentioning a lot of people and a lot of names. So I felt it was necessary for us to sit back, relax, get something to write on, something to write with, and kind of go further and figure out who were these people, right? And so in the early decades of the 19th century, Ethiopia was a land divided, right? It was, during the rise of Tewodros, the Ethiopia's rebel emperor, Kasehelu wasn't the only person. He wasn't the only ruler at the time. There was several other people, right? And so this was a country that had once sung the hymns of mighty emperors who now echo with the footsteps of many leaders and many rulers, right? Each staking claim to power, to legacy, and to survival. This was the era of the Zemene Mesafint, the era of princes, a time when the crown existed in name only. The authority was measured not by the seal of the emperor, but by the reach of a person's army. Yeah, yeah, that's what it was about. And so the gravity of this was very serious because it was crucial. It depends on who you was with and your alliances, and then not only your alliances, your rulership and your leadership relied on the loyalty of your own people. Because we found out there's been times where people switched up on them. Yeah, yeah. So here in the highlands, the mountains themselves seem to mirror or mimic the ambitions of the people of the leaders, right? Uh, they were steep and unyielding, and even unforgiving. Uh, and so the rivers carved valleys where rivalries brew, monasteries became courts of council, and every fortress on top of a hill was both uh, a line of defense as well as a shrine to power. All right, so but beyond this, there was foreign eyes was watching. Yeah, the foreigners was watching, and we've been having these discussions, we realized that the if it wasn't the British, it was the um, say the Ottoman Empire. If it wasn't the Ottoman Empire, it was the French. If it wasn't the French, it was somebody else. All these eyes was watching Ethiopia, and it went from the Red Sea ports to the distant capitals in Europe. So communication was going back and forth. So-called missionaries would come in, but I think they were spies. Yeah. So they call themselves diplomats. They call them traders, and they recorded everything that was going on, right? And then not only everything that was happening trade wise, but every shift in alliances or allegiances, every subtle gesture of strength or weakness. Yeah, these outsiders arrived with gifts, but they also had a sword. Yeah, yeah, they came with maps, with weapons, and with agendas. And so they saw Ethiopia as a place of ancient faith, but also a chessboard of influence. Yeah, so many moving parts, so many moving pieces. And this is the 19th century. So Ethiopia was very fragile. You see what I'm saying? And so this is the stage. This is the mid 19th century. Okay, and in these highlands, uh, they were shadows, and there's also places where light appeared, and then there's leaders that wielded power, and the seeds of Ethiopia's future unity will be quietly shown and you see it in battles, you see it in different times. So let's get to it. So here's some of the questions we're going to answer. Right? So what defines legitimate power in the Ethiopian highlands? Because I've learned that the Solomonic dynasty wasn't a straight line. It was so many different rulers, you know, and they all at one point in time claimed to be connected. right? Connected to King Solomon, right? And so, what will legitimize this power? Lineage, divine sanction, or the ability to rule effectively? And the next question is, how did Ethiopia's provincial leaders or lords balance autonomy and unity during the era of princes or the Zemene Mesafint? Number three, in what ways did contact with foreign powers transform or test Ethiopia's sovereignty and in spiritual integrity? Because remember, the Ethiopian nation was a majority Ethiopian Orthodox Church nation. So how did these missionaries come in, and how did they fit with all this, right? And what spiritual lessons emerge from the era of the era of princes, right? And what do they reveal about the enduring soul of the Ethiopian civilization? This era, in my opinion, set the stage for the rise of Haile Selassie. You see what I'm saying? So think about it. So we're going to talk about the fractured empire. Number two, lords, lineages, and local thrones. Number three, foreign eyes on the Highlands. Number four, diplomacy, deception, and the struggle for power. And number five, legacy of the lords. Right. So it's five things we're going to talk about. There's five things. Right. So I hope all is well with you. Get you something to write on, something to write with, and let's get to it, right? So this is Ethiopia, Kush, and Kemet, and of course our four pillars. This is pillar number one: Ethiopia, the source and sanctuary. Pillar number two: Kemet, the blueprint of sacred civilization. Number three: Kush and Nubia, the corridor of continuity, and pillar four: the hidden code, spiritual science, symbols, and the esoteric legacy of Africa. Right now, so here it is. Here's the thing: the fall of Gondar, I think, left a vacuum. It left a power vacuum, and there was no emperor, in my opinion, no emperor could immediately fill. And so of that, there was regional rulers known as Ras or uh, the Zazmak or Dejazmach. This is more like a duke. Those nobles and leaders rose to prominence, controlling areas in their with their own armies, taxes, and courts. The Solomonic line, as I mentioned before, endured in name as a symbol, as a spiritual beacon, yet real power flowed through the hands of these people or these lords, right? And so let me see here. In the north, in the north, we have I have the maps. Of course, I got the maps. I got the maps, right? In the north, we have Ras Ali of Yiju. Okay, he emerged as a formidable kingmaker, pulling the puppet emperors across the chessboard of Gondar. Right, his influence stretched across the Wallo and the central Highlands. Right, here it is. So he was very prominent up north. Okay, he was notice in the map, he was very big up north in Gondar right there, and then and as well as further south in Wallo, Wollo, and the Central Highlands, a combination of military might and shrewd alliances. He had to make it happen, right? So he thrived with he used some military power and alliances, right? So also also in the north, in the Simon Islands. Oh, I'm sorry, not islands, but the Simon Mountains, close to Tigray. Wube Haile Mariam, he cultivated a court that rivaled any any sophistication, embracing diplomacy, modernization, and tactical cunning. Okay, so now what he did, he's up there up north, right next to Ras Ali, the second. So I'm sure they had some interaction, be it political or even physical. I'm sure they did. I'm sure they them or their people had some interaction. Okay. Then in Gojam, further south, then in Gojam, um, you have the Desmak Gashu Zewde, Zew, Gashu Zudi, he was a defender of, say, the old ways of resisting innovation, yet commanding the loyalty of his people through piety and martial skill. Okay. Every leader held power in delicate balance. Local monasteries were not only, say, spiritual leaders or spiritual centers, but political arbiters, mediating disputes, legitimizing claims. A soldier was raised not. Okay, my apologies, fam. I realized that when the downside of recording downstairs is that everybody comes downstairs when you want to record, and so and it gets really active magically and all of a sudden. So my apologies. I'm sorry. Matter of fact, I'm going to keep this. I'm going to keep this in here. So yeah. So now, so there were provincial leaders, and they were engaged in territorial battle. Okay, not just physically but politically. And so the last person we talked about was uh, Gashu Zildi, he defended the old ways, resisting innovation, yet commanding the loyalty of his people through piety and martial skill. Right, every lord held power in. They have their own influence, have their own situation. Local monasteries were not only spiritual centers but political uh, arbiters. Right, mediating disputes and legitimizing claims. Soldiers was raised not only from the sons of nobles, but from entire communities, bound by obligation and loyalty to their lord's vision or whoever is running that situation at the time. Right? The fragmented empire produced a paradox. It produced a problem. Chaos and creativity intertwined in the Highlands. Disputes over land or secession could ignite war. Yet the same conflicts demanded negotiation, diplomacy, and strategic marriages. So they had to compromise. People had to make adjustments, right? The provincial courts became crucibles of governance, where leadership, faith, and survival connected, right? So it was a time when Ethiopia's soul was tested, and the lessons of the leaders of the Highlands would echo far beyond their own lifetime. This is what it was. This is what was happening in Ethiopia, and this is the thing. This one thing I learned about this is that it was so many moving parts, just like the chessboard that we saw earlier. So many different things that was happening. Okay, in Ethiopia, we couldn't just say one leader ran everything. No, right? So it was a time when Ethiopia was going through. So I'm gonna say this at the end of this video, whatever. Check out the Zemene Mesafint. Check out that episode, Ethiopia's Age of Princes. Yeah, when we get done with this, check it out. So if you want to learn more about Ethiopia, Kemet, and Kush, like and subscribe. All right, then let's learn together, because yeah, I'm learning more and more every day, and it's always something new. It's always something different, right? So we talked about the fractured empire a little bit. Now we're about to get into lords, lineages, and local thrones. Foreign eyes on the Highlands, diplomacy, deception, and the struggle for power, legacy of the lords, right? So here it is. In Ethiopia, the legitimacy of a ruler, get this, was measured not only by armies but by ancestry. It was measured by ancestry. It was measured by piety and ceremony. Lineages may be connected to marriage. That carried a lot of weight, right? And so, but lineage by itself, the bloodline, the DNA carried weight. Each leader nurtured its own network of noble families, fortified towns, and monastic alliances. These leaders, these lords of the Highlands, were not just, say, administrators or politicians. They were custodians of culture. They were custodians of faith and the rhythm of Ethiopia itself. So it was a lot happening. Okay, so we have Ras Ali of Yiju, an Oromo ruler. He was an Oromo ruler of exceptional cunning. He exemplified the delicate balance between the conquest and diplomacy. Though his lineage was not, say, connected to Solomon, he understood that power must be seen divinely and it should have been divinely sanctioned, right? His court in Gondar was a masterclass in the sense of in political theater. Puppet emperors presided, and while Ras Ali pulled the strings in the background, right? He was the one that was making it all happen, right? Commanded respect from rivals, emissaries, and religious leaders. His army, his military, composed of Highland leaders, even their young people, and loyal retainers maintain order across Wallo and parts of the Central Plateau. So he had control of this central part of Ethiopia. And just like a chessboard, for those who are familiar with the game of chess, if you control the center of the board, you basically control the whole game. But how long will he maintain this control? You know what I mean? So his greatest strength, though, it was in the subtle art of negotiation, forging alliances, signing treaties, arranging marriages, and co-opting clerical authority to consolidate influence. So if he realized that he did not have the influence religiously directly, he would say connect with, say, a local preacher or a local bishop or whatever. Sounds like something we would do nowadays, right? Sound familiar, right? All right, let's go. So, in the north, we have right next to him in the Tigray area, in the Saman Mountains, Wube Heli Meriam. He handled things differently. He cultivated a court that reflected both martial prowess and cultural sophistication. Wube, WUBE, was a ruler who embraced innovation without abandoning tradition. Okay, he modernized his army quickly with European tactics, fortified the strongholds, and maintained correspondence with foreign envoys, including British and the Egyptians. So he had connections outside of Ethiopia. Would that help him, though? Would that benefit him? We'll see. And so he also understood the power in the Highlands was not solely through force. He cultivated monasteries and church leaders and allies, just like Ras Ali II. In Wube's court, art, music, and scholarship flourished alongside the clang of arms and clang of the military, clanging sounds of swords and shields. The microcosm of Ethiopia's complex interplay with faith, governance, and strategy was a part of his side of the chessboard. Okay. Then we have Goshu Zudi of Gojam. He stood as a pillar, like I mentioned earlier, of continuity, restraint. There's not that many pictures of him, so I didn't have. I'm sorry, fam. I didn't have any direct pictures of him, but we do see that he did have some influence, right? So much that he is named. And so he stood in as a pillar of continuity in Ethiopia. And when everybody is changing, when everybody's adjusting and everybody's doing their own thing, no, he resisted. He was resistant to rapid change. He commanded loyalty through piety. He focused on discipline, okay, and the respect of local nobility. The Gojam monasteries was rich rich with illuminated manuscripts and ancient relics, were both spiritual havens and centers of political negotiation. Emissaries from neighboring provinces and even distant European missionaries traveled to Gojam, traveled towards that land, seeking mediation or guidance. So there's local leaders came to see him, and people from the outside came to see him. Here, the past was preserved, and governance was intertwined with ritual. Okay. Every military campaign and secession dispute carried the blessing or at least the observation of the Ethiopian church. Now, then we have King Shali, Shaila Selassie, King Shalia Selassie of Shewa, Shewa. He laid the groundwork for administrative and infrastructural reform. We talked about him a little bit in a previous episode, and so unlike Ras Ali or Ujumbe, his focus was on systemic consolidation. He focused on unity. Okay. And so he standardized taxation, strengthening garrisons, and creating networks of loyalty among the local chiefs. Shali Selassie understood that sustainable rule required both respect from the people and a reputation that extended beyond the border. So reputation is important, right? His approach allowed Shewa to grow in relative autonomy while remaining sensitive to the larger currents of Ethiopian politics. He was a politician, but he was also I guess you could say, how you say, a great organizer. Right. So we have even in the modern civil rights movement, where we have Martin Luther King, I think who's that? Kwame Ture. Kwame Ture, he said that Martin Luther King was a great mobilizer, right? And Malcolm X was a great organizer. So in this sense, King Shali Selassie was a great organizer. Okay, he focused on consolidation. He focused on unity, even in a place such as the era of princes, the Zemene Mesafint. His approach allowed Shewa to grow in relative autonomy while remaining sensitive to the larger currents of Ethiopian politics, because he realized that the world was bigger than Shewa, the world was bigger than Ethiopia, and he had to make some changes. So beyond these major figures, there was numerous lesser nobles and warlords that shaped the political landscape. And then we get this in Tigray, we have an up and coming young man named Johannes the Fourth, Jasmine Kasai. Okay, Jasmine Kasai. He was soon become Johannes the Fourth. He built his reputation as a tactician and unifier of small territories. He realized that he had to, if he was going to get boots on the ground, he had to be big on a local level, right? So by connecting the small areas and being a unifier of these small territories, this prepared him for the larger stage and the large ambitions that will soon follow. We'll get with him a little bit later. But in Wallo, the local chiefs leveraged the region's fertile lands and strategic trade routes to maintain influence, often balancing loyalty to Ras Ali with self-interest. Even distant lowland territories like regions bordering the Awash River in the south. It played a role in commerce and diplomacy, proving that no province existed in isolation. We have to understand, we have to realize that we are not by ourselves. No man, I heard somebody say, no man is an island by themselves. Right? So then we had the marriage alliances. There was crucial tools of diplomacy. Daughters of lords were wed to rivals and everything. And so this solidified temporary truces or forging new bonds of loyalty. Sons were trained in both warfare and government. Okay, often sent to serve in allied provinces as hostages or apprentices. Depends on who does the paperwork. Because this is what I learned. I did just recently, story time. I did some family history. And upon reading the information, this was post emancipation. This was like in 1866, I think. And this guy wrote that my ancestor was was his servant, or some kind of he was under some kind of indentured servitude. No, you still trying to make him your slave. Yeah. So in this case, these people here were these sons were trained in both warfare and often was sent to serve allied provinces as hostages or apprentices, right? Um, this intricate web of familial ties created a dynamic equilibrium in which conflict and cooperation existed side by side, a delicate dance of ambition and trust. And guess who was involved? The monasteries. Monasteries served as both traditional centers, spiritual centers, and power brokers. They all made it happen. They all got it done and fixed at the church. The abbot or the pastor of an influential monastery could legitimize a claim to a throne, mediate disputes, and even muster armed support when necessary. So these priests, just like I remember when we discussed the priests in Kemet, some of those priests had their own military. Some of these monks had some muscle too. Don't get it twisted. So they, because some of these monasteries maintain their own militias. They had small militias, a small army, often aligned with specific leaders, with specific lords, creating a sacred network of influence that intersected with temporal power. And so the symbolism of these institutions reinforced the idea that authority in Ethiopia was not just political; it was also spiritual. And a ruler's failure to honor this principle could undermine his legitimacy to rule. And so the landscape, though, the Highland landscape itself was inseparable from the exercise of power, right? Mountains provided natural fortresses, rivers defined boundaries, and valleys facilitated trade and military maneuvering. So lords who mastered terrain, the leaders who mastered the terrain, could defend against overwhelming forces. They was able to project some influence into neighboring cities and maintain communication across vast distances. In a sense, see, the geography of the Highlands was both a safeguard and a test to see if you're really serious about this. Those who ruled effectively had to harmonize strategy, the environment, and the divine principle. Okay. So whoever was a ruler of the people, they have to be a ruler of that land. That's what that is. So, and this was also a period where culture and ritual reinforced authority. They had crowning ceremonies and feasts and religious festivals. It was more than symbolic, right? They were performative demonstrations of power and divine favor, right? A leader who could summon the support of the church, organize a spectacular procession and a feast and a festival, or sponsor a scholarly activity gained morale as well as political legitimacy. These folk had to play the game. They had to play the game. They had to play the music. They had to go to church. They had to go and shake hands. They had to go in politics. They had to put on this public display of pomp and circumstance. This made the people see them as leaders. So the lords of the Highlands were masters of multiple realms, as I mentioned before. Simultaneously, they had to deal with the physical plane, the spiritual plane. They had to deal with war, diplomacy, faith, and paperwork. Shoot. They had to deal with tradition and innovation. Each move on the chessboard of provinces had a corresponding ripple effect in the spiritual and physical plane. And this is all happening in Ethiopia. In their courts, every act of generosity, every judgment rendered, every alliance formed, carried resonance in the hearts of the people, a reflection of Ethiopia's enduring notion that leadership was both human and divine. So through their intricate networks of kingship, monastic ties, and military strength, these provincial rulers preserved Ethiopia's sovereignty, okay, and identity, even in the absence of a strong central emperor. But their actions, sometimes ruthless, sometimes wise, and always deliberate, created the political landscape that would challenge and shape and ultimately give rise to Kasahelu, the future emperor Theodoros. Yeah, all this political maneuvering, all these different factions, all these different leaders gave rise to one person. Yeah, yeah. And we talked about the rise of Theodoros. It was pretty interesting. And so the Highlands were alive and well with strategy and symbolism, a stage upon which the drama Ethiopia's fragmented state, yet resilient provinces unfolded. Each leader, each lord, each monastery, each alliance carried not only political weight but spiritual significance, and reminded that in Ethiopia power was never worldly, and mountains themselves bore witness to the dance of ambition, faith, and destiny. Right. And so now, what we got next? What we got next? We got the foreign eyes on the Highlands. Here we go. Here we go. The foreigners, the outsiders are at the camp. So, but before we get into that, though, before we get to the foreigners, before we get to that, I got a question. You all right? So, would you rather live in ancient Ethiopia, Axum, or ancient Nubia, Napata? Like and comment below. Would you rather live in ancient Ethiopia or Axum, more specific, to be specific, or ancient Napata? Like and comment below. Let me know. All right, so the foreigners. Beyond the peaks and valleys of Ethiopia, the world was awakening to a strategic and spiritual significance of the Highlands. European powers, uh, Egypt, and even, like I said before, the Ottomans turned their gaze towards a land whose mountains hid both ancient kingdoms as well as fractured provinces. For these foreign observers, Ethiopia was both exotic and enigmatic, a place where faith, culture, and politics intersected in ways that few outsiders could fully understand, right? And so when we talked about Ethiopia's ongoing battle with the British as well as the French, they have not given up trying to infiltrate Ethiopia. But based on what I've learned, uh, this is an ongoing thing. This has been going on for centuries. This is, I believe, this is mid 1800s. This has been going on for at least 400 years. Somebody from Europe, somebody from the Ottoman Empire had been trying to infiltrate Ethiopia either by force or by finesse. So they try finesse. Okay, they try finesse. And so we have the missionaries, right? They would arrive first with the promise of faith and learning. British emissaries like Samuel Gobat, later the bishop, who became later the Bishop of Jerusalem, traveled through the provinces, documenting local practices, translating scriptures, and establishing schools. Then we had German and Swiss missionaries, including Kraft and Eisenberg, recorded the geography, the language, and culture. Yeah, they was going around. They was writing down everything they saw, right? And often serving as the quote unquote intermediaries between provincial lords and European capitals. Really, the reason why they was there, if they was trying to intervene at all, they was trying to protect the European interests. They were in Ethiopia trying to protect Europe's best interests, not Ethiopia's. And so and then we had the diplomats. Okay, we had the missionaries, we had the diplomats. Britain, they was watching the Red Sea. We're gonna figure out why the Red Sea is so important, right? So we dealt with the Red Sea and the Horn of Africa for strategic advantage. They sent envoys to negotiate influence, secure trade routes, and understand the military capacities of the Highland leadership. France, they was cautious but yet ambitious, dispatched explorers and cartographers to map terrain and report intelligence on local rulers. They were all out there in Ethiopia spying. Meanwhile, Egyptian and Ottoman officials sought to expand influence southward, pushing down the Nile Valley, okay, offering alliances, gifts, or military support to sympathetic nobles. So we had multiple groups trying to move in on Ethiopia, and they was sending missionaries, they're sending weapons or sending spies to fight the other foreign group. Now some provincial rulers were not passive with their interactions. Ujumbe Haile Mariam understood the value of cultivating foreign relations. He welcomed, according to sources, he welcomed the missionaries selectively, granting them passage and protection, but also measured carefully how their presence affected the balance of power. Ujumbe incorporated foreign advisors into his army, which was a mistake. Training scholars in European tactics, training soldiers in European tactics, and using imported firearms to strengthen his hold over the north and Tigray area. Yet he never allowed foreign influence to overshadow his sovereignty. Every gift, every envoy was a tool in his ongoing negotiation for legitimacy. So, and then we have Ras Ali. He used similar strategies. The region of Gondar courted European attention to project power beyond his immediate reach. Through correspondence, gifts, and careful diplomacy, he shaped perceptions abroad while maintaining his authority at home. For Ras Ali, foreign interests was a mirror reflecting his own prestige. So he felt like if he had political pull outside of Ethiopia, it may seem like he is the best person. He's the better man. Once again, another leader seeking affirmation outside of their own people. It's crazy work. And I'm gonna tell you, I don't care. Real talk. I don't care how politically correct it is. You can't give these people any space in your kingdom. No, you can't, because they feel that if you give them space, they can have the whole nation at any time. Yeah. And Emperor Theodorus, he found that out. And unfortunately, he found that out the hard way, right? Now, trade was another realm of influence. The port of Massawa on the Red Sea became a conduit for weapons, textiles, and luxury goods. Why was this port so important, y'all? Yeah, what? For the last couple of episodes, the port of Massawa has been, or the eastern seaport along the Horn of Africa has been a major focal point. Now, I know they had rifles and artillery that came from Europe and other places. Egypt carried they carried some things over treacherous mountain paths into the hands of Highland armies. They had coins. They brought maps and printed text flowed alongside with the weapons, creating a dynamic network in which commerce and politics were inseparable. Leaders who controlled the trade routes. Here's one reason why it was important. Leaders who controlled the trade routes, they controlled the money. Right? So those who controlled the trade routes could leverage both wealth and access to foreign technology, giving them a strategic advantage over their rivals back in Ethiopia. Yet the spiritual dimension of the foreign presence was never far from, say, the Highlands. Okay, but now here's a map, fam. This is a map, by the way, of the Horn of Africa, and we have Djibouti here, this Somalia, this Ethiopia, Eritrea, Yemen. All these ports here pointed eastward, and so anybody, and that's the rest of the world. So anybody who had control of this controlled a lot of things. They controlled the flow of trade outside of Ethiopia as well as inside it. So the spiritual dimension of foreign presence was never far from the Highlands rulers. So the so we have the monasteries. They observe the arrival of missionaries with wary curiosity. Some clerics saw the Europeans as potential allies. I don't know why. You had your own religion. I don't know why. But they saw some of these Christian Europeans as potential allies in strengthening the Christian orthodoxy. Others feared contamination of tradition. Yeah. So on one side, we have some people that say, "Hey, these people may be okay. They may help. They may help expand the ministry and everything else." The other folks say, "I don't know about that. I don't know." Okay. And so they felt by supporting it, it would contaminate their own traditions. The provincial rulers had to navigate these perspectives carefully. Supporting missionaries could enhance prestige with European powers, but failing to honor the local clergy, you breaking tradition. Okay, it would basically delegitimize your authority. So Ethiopia, every foreign interaction carried both a worldly and a sacred weight. Now, got a question real quick. Why the port of Massawa? Why the port of Massawa? Okay, why? You know, I gotta get back to that. Why the port of Massawa? Okay, so the Red Sea, a narrow ribbon of blue dividing Africa from Arabia, has always been more than a body of water. It is I think, in my opinion, it's a corridor to empires, a corridor to different worlds, a lifeline for trade, faith, and power. And at the heart of this ancient maritime crossroads is Massawa, the fabled port of the Ethiopian highlands. So, now, for more than 1,000 years, Massawa served as Ethiopia's open door to the Red Sea. Caravans from the highlands descended onto its coral-built harbors, carrying gold, carrying ivory, frankincense, myrrh, treasures that once filled the markets of Egypt, Arabia, and the rest of the world. And in return, they got spices, silks, glass, sacred texts, flowing inland through the rugged passes towards Axum, Lalibela, and Gondar. And so Massawa, it was more than a port. It was a meeting place. It was a meeting of the worlds. African merchants, Arab scholars, and later Ottoman governors all passed through these gates. From here, Islam spread into the Horn of Africa, carried by merchants and mystics who founded mosques and Sufi lodges along the coast. Its narrow streets echo with Arabic, Tigray, and Ottoman Turkish, making it one of the Red Sea's most diverse melting pots. And so by the medieval era, okay, so by the medieval era, I'm sorry, because it's a gateway to the empire, right? Crossroads to civilization, deal with the language and the melting pot of cultures. Massawa's economic pulse. By the medieval era, Massawa's wealth rivaled other Red Sea ports like Suakin, Jeddah, and Aden. Its deep water harbor made it ideal stop for ships navigating between the Suez Canal and the Indian Ocean. Through Massawa, the Ethiopian highlands stayed connected to global commerce long before the Suez Canal was ever built, okay, or manufactured. Then we had the Ottoman seizure. By in the 16th century, a new power arrived. The Ottoman Empire, seeking to control the spice trade and block Portuguese influence, seized Massawa around 1557. We had the discussion, and they occupied that space for 300 years, right? They established it as a part of the Habash Eyalet, the Ottoman province of Abyssinia. For the Ottomans of Massawa was a naval stronghold and a listening post on Africa's eastern flank. Okay. For Ethiopia, it was a loss of sovereignty, a vital artery to the sea, now under foreign control. Okay, it was also the religious frontier. Massawa was a religious frontier. Um, it was a spiritual place. It became a base for Islamic scholars, Sufi teachers, and imams who carried the traditions of the Red Sea world deep into the interior. At the same time, Ethiopian Christian emissaries and monks passed through the same port, embarking on going on pilgrimages and diplomatic missions to Jerusalem. This made Massawa a stage where two great faiths met, not only in rivalry but in dialogue and exchange, right? And so then we have the empires. We have the empires and resistance, right? When the Ottoman power declined, new forces rose. That's the way it is. The Egyptians under Muhammad Ali occupied Massawa in the 19th century, followed by the Italian colonizers in 1885, who turned it into their first stronghold in Eritrea. Each empire understood the same truth. Whoever held Massawa controlled the gateway between Africa and Arabia. Everybody understood that. But even as the flags changed, Ethiopian resistance never faded. From the Emperor Johannes IV to local Highland rulers, the struggle for the Red Sea became a symbol of national endurance. So, um, today's Massawa stands as a living monument uh, to its layered past, stone buildings scarred by time and war, yet still whispering of a golden age when the Red Sea carried the heartbeat of Africa's civilizations. Its story reminds us that control of the coast has always meant more than trade. It meant sovereignty, it meant survival, and the right to speak to the world. You telling your own story, right? And so, yeah, but this is just a little bit. We're gonna have to get more into it. We will go into the Red Sea Highway. We will have a discussion about the Red Sea Highway. Get ready for that. East Africa's forgotten maritime empire. We dealt with the trade, the traders of the Indian Ocean. I think it's about time for us to kind of come back around and look at that again, right? But yeah, so missionaries, they left detailed records of Ethiopian courts and battles, ceremonies, snapshots of a world where faith, diplomacy, and strategy were intertwined. Letters describe Ras Ali, his court in Gondar, Wube's fortified palaces, and the meticulously organized Shiwan administration. They were telling it all. They was spilling the beans. These accounts, often filtered through European eyes, reveal the Highlander's skill in balancing ambition and spirituality. A ruler who negotiated with foreigners successfully was seen not only as cunning but as aligned with providence, interpreting worldly opportunity as a reflection of divine favor. In the Highlands, foreign presence was a crucible test. It was a test of wisdom, a test of diplomacy, and foresight. To survive, the rulers had to recognize the hidden currents of power, both human and spiritual. They learned that alliances were temporary, that gifts carried expectations, and that every act of hospitality or caution resonated beyond the immediate political realm. Mountains and missionaries and emissaries alike bore witness to a dance of influence, a complex interplay in which Highlands remained sovereign even under the gaze of a larger world. So now we talk about diplomacy, deception, and the struggle for power. Now, get this: in Ethiopia, diplomacy was both a weapon and a battlefield. Right? Alliances were fragile. Agreements forged in one season could be undone the next. Every move had to account for rivals, neighbors, foreign emissaries, and divine mandate that underpinned all the authority. Right? The provincial lords of the strongholds mastered this game. Okay, we had Ras Ali on one side, exemplifying the art of strategic deception. Puppet emperors resided in Gundar, while Ras Ali orchestrated the regional policies behind the curtain. He leveraged the ambitions of Wube Heli Meriam and Goshu and other lords to maintain his dominance. Ras Ali, he was a genius. He laid he was making every rival believe they had agency, they had a part, while subtle, while slowly guiding the outcome to his advantage. His interaction with European envoys were no less calculated. Gifts and diplomatic language became tools in the ongoing performance of authority, projecting strength both within Ethiopia and around the world. Then we have Wube Miriam. He navigated a different path. He didn't choose to be the puppet master. He was direct. He didn't care about none of that. He was direct. He wanted direct influence over neighboring territories, expanding the North's reach through both warfare and negotiation. Foreign advisors augmented his military capacity and his strategic alliances with missionaries, traders, and even distant Ottoman agents added layers of protection. Yet Wobe's greatest asset remained his ability to read both human ambition and spiritual currents that legitimized rulership. His court was a theater, it was a play in which political calculation, ceremony, and divine symbolism intertwined seamlessly. Conflict was inevitable. War, skirmishes, sieges, and full-scale battles tested the endurance of armies and the wisdom of the leaders. The Battle of Gur-Amba, Guramba, and other engagements illustrate how military skill and political acumen were inseparable. I told you guys earlier that Ras Ali II and Wube being right next door to each other, it was going to be some conflict. I told you. And so this success on the battlefield enhanced legitimacy. It was all about reputation and power. Failure could be interpreted as divine disfavor. Here in the Highlands, the Ethiopian Highlands, strategy and providence were inseparable. Commanders who ignore spiritual observances risk not only defeat, but erosion of authority. And then we have the rise of Kasahelu, the future Emperor Theodorus. He started to rise. He started his ascent, a warrior of remarkable ability and vision. He recognized the true power lay in uniting the fragmented provinces, just like Shelley Selassie, aligning martial prowess with moral authority. He used the books, the Flasha Nagast, Feta Nagast. Okay, through careful campaigning, symbolic gestures, and strategic alliances, he positioned himself as a figure capable of transcending the provincial rivalries that dominated the Highlands for decades. But foreign powers continued to shape this landscape, though, because this was moving towards the dawn of the scramble for Africa. British envoys, while seemingly to be neutral, provided intelligence and arms selectively, attempting to influence outcomes for their strategic advantage. We have the missionaries over here writing the complex dance of loyalty, deception, and negotiation. Their writings offering insight and interplay. They was telling the British what they was doing and what was happening. These texts reveal a Highland world where political skill was inseparable from cultural literacy and spiritual insight, and where every act of diplomacy carried layers of meaning beyond immediate gain. In Ethiopia, diplomacy was an art form, a performance with consequences both earthly and sacred. The Lord's balanced ambition with prudence aligns with skepticism and personal gain with the exception with the expectations of faith. A single misstep could trigger revolt, could trigger war, invite foreign intervention, and undermine their authority. Yet those who mastered the subtleties of negotiation who could interpret intention, foresee consequences, and act with both courage and wisdom, it laid the groundwork for unity. Through deception, negotiation, and strategic calculation, the provincial lords of the Highlands shaped the political, cultural, and spiritual terrain, okay, that would define Ethiopia's future. They understood that power without legitimacy was fragile, that foreign influence could be an asset or a trap, and mountains and monasteries were both literal and symbolic theaters of authority. In this crucible, leaders were tested, they was tried, forged and broken. Alliances was forged and broken, and the stage was set for the rise of a new emperor. Okay, a person who will finally who will finally attempt to unify the land, right? And so the Zemene Mesafint, the era of princes, was seen as a period of fragmentation, confusion, and chaos. This was also a time of resilience. The provincial lords, each commanding their domain with vigilance and skill, okay, they preserved Ethiopia's sovereignty in ways that will shape the nation for generations to come. Their fragmented authority paradoxically became the foundation for the unity that will follow. The mountains of in the north, Gojam, Shiwa, the Wolo, were more than just places or terrains or geographical locations. They were living instruments of defense and culture. Each valley, each each pass or each hillside was a stage on which armies trained, alliances were put together, and faith was enhanced. Rulers like Wube and Goshu Zudi understood that commanding the land was inseparable from commanding loyalty, and that spiritual legitimacy was important. The blessings of monasteries, the endorsement of clergy, fortified authority, and effectively as just as important as the walls around them and the weapons. The court of these leaders cultivated culture, scholarship, and ritual. Manuscripts were copied and preserved in monasteries, libraries. Liturgy, music flourished in court chapels, and festivals brought together warriors, clergy, commanders, and commoners in a shared rhythm of society. Each act, from the crowning of a local chieftain to the celebration of a harvest, was endued with layers of meaning, reinforcing the social, political, and spiritual fabric of the Highlands. Yet, the greatest legacy of these lords lay in the greatest legacy, I think, was their strategic and symbolic focus. So I think they understood that survival depended on balance. It depended on tradition. It depended on its inheritance, a deep understanding of sovereignty, and that integrates power with principle, ambition with ethics, and human agency with divine observance. Right. So, as we move forward with the information, as we leave the Highlands, the story of these leaders resonate beyond history. They were rulers without supreme crowns. They were warriors guided by principle and diplomats whose foresight shaped a nation. Each mountain pass, each valley, each monastery witnessed their struggles, their ups and their downs. This was a testament to human endurance and spiritual weight of authority. The era of princes, the Zemene Mesafint, teaches us that fragmentation does not always signify weakness. The Highlands, with all their rivalries and complexities, preserved Ethiopia's identity, culture, and sovereignty. Right, the provincial lords understood that leadership was a multidimensional responsibility. They had to master so many things. They had to command armies. They had to cultivate loyalty. They had to honor their faith and interpret subtle signals of destiny. This period also reminds us that true power is measured not only by conquest, but by wisdom. By the ability to balance ambition with prudent strength, balancing strength with justice, balancing worldly success with spiritual integrity. The Lords of the Highlands embodied this principle, leaving behind not only a political legacy, but a moral and cultural blueprint for the generations that will follow. Their influence shaped the rise of the big three: Theodorus II, Johannes IV, and Menelik II. We're going to talk about them really soon. Leaders who unified the land while respecting the lessons of the course. They respected the land, the mountains, the rivers, monasteries of the Highlands continue to bear witness to the intricate interplay of human ambition, divine guidance, and cultural continuity, right? In the end, the Lords of the Highlands reminds us that Ethiopia's strength lies not just in kings or emperors, but in the resilience and the hope of his people. Okay, the saint it rests on the sanctity of his land and the enduring wisdom of those who govern with both courage and conscience, right? So yeah, listen to King Cam Ujumbe podcast. Ujumbe means message. We talked about the Lords of the Highlands. And get this, if you want to learn more about Ethiopia, Kemet, and Kush, like and subscribe, right? So we just talked about the Lords of the Highlands, and this was under Pillar 1, the Ethiopia, the Source and Sanctuary. And we got some books. An African History of Africa by Zinab Badawi. That's a good one. The Orthodox Church of Ethiopia, a history by John Binns, Binns. The affiliate links are in the description. Check it out. Also, the updated edition, A History of Ethiopia by Harold G. Marcus, and the Ethiopian Borderlands Essays in Regional History from Ancient Times to the End of the 18th Century by Richard Pankhurst. And we're almost done with the book, Ethiopians: A History by Richard Pankhurst. I think we're going into chapter 9. We're going to talk about Ethiopia versus Europe and the big three. Get ready. Now, we already talked about the rise of Theodorus, so we'll be talking about Johannes IV and Menelik II. Get ready. And this is my book, The Crusades and Jihad in East Africa, Religious Conflicts and Their Impact. Very few people talk about what was going on during the Middle Ages in East Africa, what was happening. When we hear about the medieval period, we normally talk about, say, Europe or Timbuktu. But there was so many other things that was happening. So check it out. And coming up, the 7 Heteru. It's gonna be a mini series. Get ready for that. It's coming up, the 7 Hathors. It's gonna be great. And the Echoes of Pharaohs, Karnak Hypostyle Hall, Echoes of the Pharaohs. We're gonna have a live discussion on that. We're gonna break down Karnak's temple. Yeah, we're gonna do that. We're gonna do that really soon. And we gotta talk about Amun's hidden chambers, where the hidden chambers in Karnak's temple. We got to deal with that. And the Clash of Empires, where we talk about Ethiopia versus Europe, how Johannes IV and Menelik II brought in a new era where Haile Selassie can thrive, right? And so, we're going to talk about Tasseti really soon. I'm really excited about that. Tasseti in the First Thrones, Nubia before Kemet. Yeah, we're going to double down on that. We're going to lean more into Nubia really soon. Get ready. And we're going to talk about Pharaoh's lost tomb. There are so many things that we got to discuss, and we're going to do it, right? And so, before we go, we're going to shout out our Ujumbe members, Abina Scott, Brother Mo, and Brother Isu, One Voice Africa. They help with the getting ideas with the content, and they get a heads up on the videos and everything. And yeah, so join the membership, like and subscribe, join the membership. Yeah, membership has its privileges. You know what I'm saying? So today we talked about the Lords of the Highland. We talked about the fractured empire. We was interrupted by my youngest son cooking in the kitchen. It is what it is. Yeah. Lords, lineages, and local thrones, foreign eyes on the Highlands, diplomacy, deception, and the struggle for power. legacy of the Lords. If you like the content, share it with somebody that may enjoy it, and or share it on your social media of choice. Don't just share it to some random person that may not like it. Share it with somebody that you think they'll like it. All right. So we talked about, listen to King Campbell Ujumbe podcast. We talked about the Lord of the Highlands. And if you want to catch up on our Ethiopia, the Source and Sanctuary playlist, I got that for you. And if you want to catch up on one of our other one of our other videos, I got that for you too. So you listen to King Campbell Ujumbe podcast, and Ujumbe means message. And today we talked about the Lords of the Highlands, Ethiopia's provincial rulers and foreign powers in the 19th century. And I will talk to you later.